Well, if everyone's ready, this meeting is now called to order. And we will start with roll call.
Kim Bailey,
Here.
Maria Davies,
Here.
Ruth Johnson.
Here.
Ryan Westcoat.
Present.
Kim York.
Here. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. All right, our first item tonight is an informational item, our budget update.
All right, before we, well, first of all, let me start by saying appreciate everybody giving up another evening to come in this evening. And timing-wise, this was kind of important to us. When we had our last meeting 2 weeks ago, we weren't quite ready to award bids on several of our construction projects for the summer, and waiting 4 more weeks till our regular April 27th meeting would have kind of put us behind the timeline we needed, I think, to get all the contracts done and the scheduling all going for all of our contractors and so forth. So we appreciate you giving us another evening to try to get some of these bids under contract. But before we do that, we need to talk a little bit about the overall budget picture so that you can see how this all fits in with what we've talked about so far. Obviously, at the March 9th work session, we talked about budget and had some scenarios in front of you that included money for capital projects and money for compensations, salary and benefits for staff. We've got some additional information that we're going to share with you tonight to kind of bring you up to date. I think I mentioned at the work session March 9th that we were not as far along in the state budget process as we normally would be. With the change in administration, the budget proposal by the governor came out a few weeks later than normal, which has caused the legislature to be a few weeks behind schedule. The good news there is that a week before last, right before the legislative spring break, the House Budget Committee issued their revised or projected budget, or the budget plan that they were putting forward, and then they've had hearings on it this week to where they've gotten it to the point where they're going to be voting on it at the House level next week, I think next Tuesday, for final approval. And there's good news in that. The House Budget Chair was pretty adamant early on that he was going to try to do what he could to fully fund the formula if possible. And in fact, he's got a budget proposal through the committee that will do that. And likewise, he's added the money back into transportation to make it equivalent in funding next year to what was budgeted this year before the withholdings. Right now, statewide, about 20% of the transportation money is being withheld, and the budget plan that is in the House right now has that back to what the funding level was originally this year. So we've got two important revenue streams that, at least right now, look more favorable than what they looked like a few weeks ago. So we've tried to capture that in our budget planning document, and Cindy's just added basically a column here to what we looked at the March 9th work session. And really, if you'll scroll down just a little bit, it's all really just at the state level primarily. So the state formula and classroom trust line item there, we're projecting additional revenues there. And just so you know, we're not assuming that full funding the formula necessarily means we're going to get it all, because we usually don't. There's usually revenue sources that don't quite make, and they're a little short of what the full amount might be. So we're holding back on that just a little bit, and it's got to go through the Senate side, and it could get reduced, changed, or what have you on the Senate side as it goes through the rest of the process. But typically, once the House is done with it, it doesn't change a lot. We'll have to kind of wait and see how that goes. The second line item under the state category is transportation, and we bumped that a little bit as well because of, as we mentioned, the House Budget Committee has identified enough revenues to try to make that appropriation whole. We didn't get very aggressive with that estimate because that's usually the first place withholdings come. If they're short and they have to pull money from education, it almost always comes from the transportation line item, if you will. But collectively, if you'll scroll down to the bottom, Jason, it's a little over $400,000 worth of additional revenue that we're looking at right now. So the question is then, how does that fit into our overall picture? And we're going to look at a list of capital projects, but my general thought right now, based on looking at how confident I am in these numbers and what our needs are, is to kind of take that pot of money, if you will, and put half of it into the compensation package that we've gotten under consideration, and put some of it into the capital projects, knowing that if this doesn't quite make it all the way through the process. Some of it went into non-recurring in that regard. So we'll come back to the overall budget scenario here in just a little bit, but I wanted to at least give you an idea where this source of revenue would be. And if there's any questions on that, I'll try to answer those now.
I was just going to say, I was reading today how the Senate side is, they're a little more leery because if we fully fund the formula, then the act kicks in that they have to chip in for early childhood then, so.
Yes, Brian and I have been in a conference the last 2 days, and today in several, that was kind of several sessions, that was kind of the talk of what really is going to happen, and it'll be part of what we're talking about again tomorrow. And I think even though the Senate budget chair has been a little more hesitant, I think there'll be a lot of pressure, since if there's actually something on the table that would fully fund the formula, I think there'll be a lot of pressure to follow through with that. So I'm still pretty optimistic, even though at least one person on the Senate side is hedging a little bit, just because they know as soon as they fully fund the formula, that kicks in that early childhood attendance for the following year. And just to be clear, that early childhood attendance is not for every kid in early childhood education. It's for free and reduced lunch kids with a cap on it. So it's not a major windfall, but it could, I've heard estimates anywhere $20 to $60 million statewide for that to kick in for all of the accredited districts.
Well, and I'm fully supportive of putting money in the compensation package. You know, we are asking a lot of our staff this next year, and it's not just our teachers, it's all of our staff, even our administrators. So I'm even comfortable, and I mentioned this last time, but I'm even comfortable dipping into the reserves, and I understand it's a recurrent expense, but I'm okay with that, because I think it's important that we show our staff how valuable they are to us. And what I would propose is even giving a raise to the base, because then that way it affects our classified staff, our certified staff, and our administrators right across the board. So me, I mean, the numbers that I was kind of playing with was like a $700 increase to the base. I mean, and we're looking at about 1% reserve. Mm-hmm. But to do that, it would raise everybody in the district.
You're talking about in lieu of steps?
No, this would be in addition to whatever Team Ray-Pec decided.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the proposal that I would offer.
Okay.
And would like to consider it.
Why don't we come to
Fair
the
enough.
overall budget picture after we kind of look through this capital projects list, and then we can try to tie all of that together then and
Perfect.
follow up with that, if that'd be okay. So, Jason, if you'll then open up the capital projects list. In February at our work session, Brian had a pretty lengthy list of projects that we had been working on and with cost estimates. And so now we're to the point now where the vast majority of them we're not just working on estimates, but we've got some bid numbers now to work with. So we've also added a few items to this list that were not on the February list as we've gotten further into our planning and identified some other things that we think need to happen. So we're going to be looking at bids on 8 different parts of our projects here shortly. The first part of this list, the building improvements and the pavement improvements, were the 2 biggest ticket items that we had. And so the building improvements came in basically right at the budget we had estimated, because we had estimated them at $800,000. There is one alternate that we are not recommending tonight when Brian gets to that point. I think, Kim, you had asked at the last meeting about at Shoal, that metal siding that you see on the front and the side of the building has some paint issues there. Well, that's insulated siding, and it was, I think, $137,000 just to do that cosmetic fix when at this point we may look for a paint solution yet.
Right.
There might be a short-term fix, but doing the whole sets of panels, we're probably going to be a little pricey to stay within our overall budget concept here. The pavement improvements, we had really good numbers on that, so we're recommending the entire list in that regard because we had several alternates there. And then just kind of working down the list, the playground equipment and surface, as we talked about in February, we're looking at using cooperative pricing. The site improvement bid numbers are pretty much kind of what we expected there. Had very good numbers on the fencing that go with all the playground work and a few other spots on the high school campus. The greenhouse building bid is pretty much kind of what we expected there, I think, overall for that project. We did add budget money here for the serving line revisions at Bridle Ridge and Eagle Glen. Those were not on the original list. We need to kind of lower some of those serving areas so the students can be self-serve to the extent possible, so that's been added. We had the Shoal RTU on the list last time, and the power line relocation at Shoal. It's a little higher than what we had originally estimated, but again, KCP&L are paying for a lot of that additional work as well for their part of that. Rekeying our existing doors at the high school is something new to the list. So we basically want to have a keyed system that works for the entire building. So we're getting new equipment on all the new addition and the renovated areas, and this is finishing that for the rest of the building. So we put some estimates there. At the high school, the shop area, it's actually currently 2 fax rooms next to the shop are going to be converted into another shop area. So we've got a new fax and culinary arts in the new section, and with the idea that we're going to self-perform some of the work on doing the shop renovation. We'll have to contract bits and pieces of it, but it was something we took out of the original scope of the high school project when we were worried about budget, and I think this is a pretty economical way to tackle it with Scott and his team taking the lead. I think we had irrigation renovations on the February list. Technology infrastructure, you've already approved those bids at the last couple of meetings, so that's already under bid. And then we've added design and contingency fees based on what our estimates there are. So in total, it's just over 2.6 million for this list, and that's including the contingency, which I think we've got good enough solid numbers here that we certainly wouldn't probably have to use all of that contingency. So in March 9th, when we had our last meeting, we had, in our budget plan, we had $2.4 million worth of capital projects. So this is a little bit larger than that, so that's why I'm suggesting maybe we would invest a little more in terms of reserves or new revenue into this area as well. So that gives you a sense of what we think the total need would be to finish all this transition and pick up a few maintenance projects that we need to do included with that list. So the actual bids for the ones that we're ready to award tonight we'll get to shortly, but I kind of wanted to piece this in as well. So are there any questions that Brian or I could answer, or Scott for that matter, regarding the overall list, if you will, separate from the individual bid items we're going to have here in a few minutes?
Is this included in the other handout that we have?
Yes, it's built into the summary schedule that we're going to look at next. Yeah. All right. If Jason, then you want to flip to the budget plan. This, again, this is really small numbers, but conceptually, I'll just kind of walk through. If you want to look at the 17-18 column, which is the third column of numbers, there are just a few things that we've adjusted here. In the salary benefit area, you'll see that was a 2% assumption for salary increases, that if we were to add another 200,000 into the pot of money for salary and benefits, that could go up a little bit to approximately 2.3 roughly. And that's assuming a 15% insurance. Team Ray-Pec, just so you know, has looked at the pot of money that we talked about last time and started their prioritization process. It was, a lengthy meeting because it was kind of the first time they'd really seen hard numbers on a lot of the things and tried to do some prioritization work. What I would like to be able to do is take back to them maybe a revised number. We've called an additional meeting on Monday that would be after this meeting so that we can kind of revisit those priorities and see where we're at. And what we're suggesting here is that we could add an extra 200,000 to that allocation. It was 1.3 million was our general consensus last time. This scenario would have about 1.5 million going into that pot for them to work on some prioritization.
And that's what the 2.3% represents?
Right.
Okay.
And so there could be interplay between insurance and salary in that regard. One could go up and the other could go down depending on some of the options that we have on the table for consideration. But it would give more flexibility to the salary discussion, no doubt. One of the things that we did not address in preparation for the last Team Ray-Pec meeting is the fact that our insurance increase also requires a retirement increase, because there's a retirement contribution that goes with the insurance benefit as well, and we hadn't built that into the number. So it will help deal with that issue and then leave some additional money to do other salary improvements with in that regard.
On don't know if this is the right time to ask. We've been trying to step people back up.
Mm-hmm.
Are we there yet, or are there still some people that are lagging?
There's a
Where
half
are we
step
on that?
remaining for some of our staff members.
What percentage of our staff members-ish?
I was thinking
40% roughly of our certified teachers.
40% of our certified teachers have not been fully stepped.
Yeah, they still have a half step catch up remaining.
Okay. And would the other staff, would that be the same, or is that a smaller percentage? Or
No other
No other
schedules
staff.
have half steps on them.
Okay, so it
remaining.
was just the certified
Right.
staff.
What happened was there were 2 years certified staff did not get their step, and one of those 2 years, the support staff did get their step, and the certified had money added to the schedule without their step. So that's why there's a little bit of a difference in how they were treated back in 10 and 11, which leads to a differential now.
What do we need to get all of those people up to where they need to be?
The last half step, we estimated $111,000. 112,000.
112,000?
And is that one of the things that Team Ray-Pec talks about?
They do.
One of their priorities,
Right.
one of the things they.
Right, it's on their menu of things that we've discussed. And what I would anticipate we would do, which is kind of consistent with past practice, we talk about the scenarios, and quite frankly, Brian and Lisa and Al and Cindy all work together with Michelle, and they have the Team Ray-Pec into table groups, and the 6 different table groups came out with a very similar first draft, if you will, of what it might look like in terms of insurance and benefits. But adding a little bit more to that will make more flexibility there, might bring the half step higher up or more possible or feasible. But what we're going to ask them to do is, okay, let's say the pot is 1.5 million, if you will, and they get through that process. One of the things we will ask them to do is prioritize the next thing or two that they think, if there were more funds available, what would you like to see next? And get that input from them, so then you as a board, if you want to go beyond what we've talked about, and we may have new and different information a couple weeks from now that might make that more possible. So that's kind of the approach we take with the group, and it was a really productive meeting in terms of people trying to understand. And the biggest concern there is that we may still end up with a different fully board-paid insurance plan than the one they have now, but they would still be able, in all likelihood, to be able to buy up to what they have now if they're more comfortable with that, or some of our staff. So
what's being proposed now, what's being proposed now is that that 40-ish% are still going to wait before they get their last half step?
Again, that recommendation isn't fully vetted yet. It hasn't
Okay.
been developed yet. So I don't know that we know the answer. The first draft didn't necessarily bring it to the top because at 1.3 million, we didn't have as many options.
Right.
With this adjustment, we'll have a few more, and we'll have accounted for that retirement increase that goes with the insurance increase, which we failed to do before, so.
So the extra 200,000 gives a little more wiggle room.
Correct.
Will that cover or give them enough money to cover this and benefits that we're not like, we're covering this, but now they're still losing money because benefits are so high?
Well, that's a little bit individual, because some people can choose a different benefit plan and it'll be fine for them. And others, based on their personal situation, may want a higher level of coverage but are willing to pay for it.
Yeah,
So-
but kind of a basic one. Would that cost, because I know that when insurance rates would go up higher than the raises.
Right.
So I'm just trying to figure out,
What I
I'm just
would
trying to
tell
get
you is
informed
that
on that.
there will be, and there almost certainly will be in our mind, a fully board-paid insurance plan, whether it's the exact one they have now or another one that's slightly
Okay.
different.
So obviously no increase.
Right.
0 to 0.
Okay.
So, but
But there could be a perceived difference in the insurance coverage.
Well, there
Sure.
will be an actual difference.
Absolutely.
Right.
Which is what prompted my suggestion to, add money to the base, which then raises everybody up to where that offset between the insurance increases and those other factors are less of a factor, because everybody gets an increase on top of whatever pool that we give Team Ray-Pec to play with.
Could we, do you want to go ahead and respond to that?
Well, I was just going to say, and Team Ray-Pec also has in front of them in their list of items an estimate of what it costs per $100 to add to the base.
Right.
So it's something that they've got in their mix of ideas that they're planning.
Right. Which, my suggestion was to do it outside of what they've been offered. Just the board decide to do that on our own, and then they can look at what they want to do with their insurance coverages, as well as if they want steps. This was just what the board would offer, and I think it's $700 to the base. It's exactly little over maybe 1% of our reserve.
This is my first go of it. Is there a way that we could approve as a board a range, like 200 to 400,000, whatever is needed, where we cap it, but whatever
range
is
for what?
needed? Because you were mentioning adding in another 200,000, but you're not sure how
Well,
those numbers are going to play out.
What I would suggest at this point, based on the information we have now, that if you're comfortable at least adding the 200,000, we can work from that and then ask them what would be the next thing you would want to invest in terms of the package. So then the board, if that's money to the base, or if that's that half step, if they don't have it otherwise, or whatever the other choices might be, then we can bring that back to you as part of the recommendation. We've done that in the past, that here's their primary recommendation based on 1.5 million, say, and then beyond that, if there's additional money, we would like these things to be considered, and the board can consider that at that time. That would be consistent with what we've done at times in the past. So that way we don't fix the number necessarily now, other than to put a new floor on it of 1.5 with the idea of if there's more, we're going to find out from the collective group what their interests are, which I think is a pretty reasonable way to go about it.
And just a side note, I know that my table at Team Ray-Pec was really grateful that we decided to add to the sub, just on our own, the sub rate, because it was just one less thing on the list that they had to consider. So they were grateful that we did that.
Yep, that's one of the things we shared with them at the beginning of the meeting, and that was well received, no doubt. Just to kind of share the other variables here then, really other than the adjustment in the salary percentage there, the other change then is the transfer amount to capital projects. We were showing a $3 million amount that would fund a net of $2.4 million in projects. Increasing that by $200,000 would allow us to fund the entire list I showed you previously, which would be consistent with all the bids that we're going to be asking you to award this evening. And again, that's an area where it doesn't have to be recurring. That number can be scaled up or down any year based on what we think our needs are there. So that was kind of the overall approach here with this concept, and with the idea that, again, the board always has the ability when we get to the April regular meeting to do more if you so choose, based on our most current data at that point in time. So,
And the 2.3%, is that right? What is the dollar amount, again, that represents?
it varies for every class of employee.
No, I'm sorry, total.
total dollars?
Is that 1 point, what is that?
The combination of that and a 15% insurance is around 1.5 million. That's where
For both of
the
those?
combination of those two, yes. Again, there's an interplay there between salary, benefits, and retirement that are all, depending on the choices you make, they can all go up or down in the blend, if you will. So it's about, right now, it'd be about half insurance and about half salary, roughly.
Okay.
I think I'm pretty close to that, so,
Okay.
assuming the 15% on the insurance increase, which is one of the options they have in front of them. And then at the bottom then, I think last time we showed essentially a $2.6 million use of reserves for next year with all that transition-related construction and other activity. It'll bring our balances down in the 19% range, and then we've got a step back over the next 2 or 3 years. It might get it down in the 17-18% range, but not a lot different than what we showed you a few weeks ago. But even putting that $200,000 into salary and assuming it's recurring brings that forward years, the out years, brings that number down a fraction of a percent, just because of the compounding nature of that recurring expense. So.
And I see us getting down to like 11 million. I think we had established that we need to have, is it at least 6 million to not have to do the tax anticipation loans? Is it 4 or 6 in that range?
Just under 5 million.
Okay.
At November 30th,
At
not
November
year
30th,
end.
right.
It's a-
Right, no,
it's
no,
a- yeah,
right. And so that's what I'm trying to get to in my head here, and I don't have my notes from our meeting. At year end, if it's at 11, what does that put us at our lowest point in the year? Does that put us at like 8 or 7?
I think it's in the 6 range, if
6?
I, 6 million range, if I
So
remember.
it puts us at 6 when 5 is as low as we can go without tax anticipation.
Well,
loans.
the risk of tax anticipation. and all
Without the
ki-
risk
some
of tax.
Right,
And I get timing's everything in
right.
December.
When we get our state
Right,
payment
right.
versus when we get some of our tax
But
receipts.
conservatively speaking, so in this projection, that puts us within $1 million of a point where we would need tax anticipation loans.
Potentially.
Does that make us lose some of our double A plus credit rating?
No.
It doesn't affect that.
I don't think so.
So, other
What it
people.
does do, if you, when you do tax anticipation loans, obviously it impacts your debt.
Yeah, yes, I would agree
bills.
with
So, I mean,
that. Yeah, I don't want to have to
It's not
do,
zero ramifications, but,
I would like to avoid having to do
Yeah.
that. And holding into the tension of, we're not competitive with our salary rates now, and we've asked our teachers to be very patient with us in the process of trying to get those steps up. So I would, the ones who have stayed, because I think we've lost quite a few on that, the ones who have stayed and shown a commitment to our district, I really would like to get that step increase up. I mean, when did this happen? 2010?
The one we're covering now is 2011, 10-11 school.
Yeah, so that's 6 years. I feel like they've been very patient, and if we can afford it, I really feel like we need to pull, at least to get them up with that,
Get that half step back.
get that half step back.
112.
112.
To get that half step back, and then, then I want to get competitive. I know there's other things we have to do that, but 6 years is a long time to wait, and I know that this administration did not make those decisions, and they're trying to kind of clean up the mess from past economies and whatnot. But I would like to prioritize that for these teachers who have been faithful to our district.
I think, and it is pretty highly prioritized in the Team Ray-Pec process, and when they see that they've got some additional, I mean, some of the groups were putting it in there, in the mix already, and I think that the recommendation they come back to you is likely to include that. If we just,
My only concern, and I'll defer on some ways to the people who sit on Team Ray-Pec, because you're listening to everything that's being discussed. And I don't know what all is going to be brought up for them, and so maybe in looking at all of it, that prioritization might make sense. But for me, I would hate to send it to Team Ray-Pec, and then they come back and use that money for something else. I still would like to take care of this. I still would like to take care of our teachers. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know what Team Ray-Pec is going to come back with. But
Again, I think the board is always going to have that option.
Yeah.
I think we just need to listen to hear what their real interests are, and then the board always has that option to add or do more.
Yeah, because if the board chooses, I mean, it's a vote of 4 people, and then that's done. I mean, the only discussion that needs to take place is amongst the people sitting here. It's within our power. We can actually make that happen.
Well, right, there's no doubt about that. The next meeting at Team Ray-Pec is on Monday?
Monday.
Okay.
And then we'll have one on the 18th as well. So we've got 2 scheduled now prior to our April board meeting where we hope to have a recommendation to you.
I think, and of course, and so, that will be the discussion at that next board meeting. I think the concern that I have in listening to Ryan's recommendation, or, the thought that you were putting forward, Ryan, absolutely, we all care about our teachers, and we want to do, and we have been over the last 6 years doing what we can to try to get the pay up and the compensation, including benefits and all. I think we've all, in looking at these numbers and in looking at the things we're doing, realize that it's going to take more to do that. We're going to need to engage our community again in order to get better answers than what we have. We can only work with what we have. And we see that diminishing over time, getting us down to $1 million of where we have to stay with our reserves. I think that if we did something, if the board did something like above and beyond what Team Ray-Pec requested to put, and I think that calculates out to close to $600,000, was being suggested, $600,000 within 2 years would deplete our reserves down to where they would be putting us in a tax anticipation loan situation, potentially. And if we are going to be engaging our community and asking for anything different, I think that would put us in a very bad situation, going to the community and saying, look, we've been spending money we don't have, can you help us? Would be, I think it lends to not having the trust that we need to get the support that we need to do something different. And I care about our teachers, and I want us, one of the questions we've been asked at some of the forums is, how do you build trust in your community? Well, you don't do that by spending down first and then asking for more money later. You engage the community and get the priorities set and then work towards those. I would love to keep working towards that. I think we all agree with that. I don't want to do something that shoots ourselves in the foot and causes our community not to trust us and not to want to give us, additional resources if that's what the community wants us to do. And so that would be my thought on that.
My only thought or word of caution on all that is, this is a year where we have some unique requirements. All the transition-related stuff, this extensive list of capital projects is bigger than we've done in many, many years. And so that's my thought of being a little bit cautionary until we get through that process and get a better sense of what we're going to see moving forward. But there is no doubt anything that we can do will be appreciated and hopefully make us a little bit more competitive down the road. So
The 2.6 million that we're spending this year, didn't we say 1.6 of it was one-time occurring cost?
Easily, if not more, compared to what we normally do.
Right. So, I mean, Kim, I respect what you said. I don't necessarily agree with the assessment, but I respect what you said.
Thank you. So next steps are the Team Ray-Pec meeting,
Correct.
and then see what comes out of that. By that time, a few more weeks will have gone by, and who knows, maybe something different has happened at the state or not.
Yeah. Well, I've tried to be reasonably optimistic in terms of what we
Right.
gave you in terms of estimates. So there's a limit to how far we can go with that optimism, if you will. Because the one thing that worries me the most at the state level is not necessarily where the state budget ends up in terms of what's approved in May. I'm a little worried about whether or not it's too optimistic, and then there has to be withholdings, and what those withholdings would look like for us. That would be my concern of getting too optimistic.
Right. And the withholdings are things that happen, kind of like the whammy at the back end, when you're not,
Right.
when you haven't planned for it and you don't expect it, and now you don't get $200,000 in transportation money or
Right,
something.
right. Yeah, we've lowered our estimate for this year already, and I'm not sure we've lowered it enough, but I think we've got a reasonable number for next year at this point, but.
And in times of uncertainty, that is the time when you do need to make sure you're maintaining your reserves appropriately. All right, did you need anything additional from us on that?
I appreciate that feedback, and I think Team Ray-Pec will appreciate the flexibility to try to come up with different options for their recommendation or request, and we'll make sure we ask them what are the next things you would want if the board can consider that, and then we can have a good discussion about that the next time. So.
Well, thank you for the update on that. At this time, we'll move on to our action items, which was the meeting, the first reason we called the meeting, and that was to get some bids approved so that we can keep the construction project on schedule and meet all of the deadlines. So we have a number of bids to approve, so I'll turn it over to Dr. Pettengill.
Great. I'm seeking approval for 8 bids tonight. The first bid is our building reconfiguration, getting our elementaries, our intermediates prepared to handle the kindergartners and the little guys, and then obviously the remodeling that's needed at Shoal. We covered all of these in depth a couple weeks ago, but we put that out to bid. It came back right around where we thought it would at $801,000. That bid includes 3 alternates, which are all related to plumbing for the most part. And as Dr. Monses said, a 4th alternate for the new metal on Shoal is not being recommended.
One thing I'll mention about the plumbing revisions, we did those as alternates because if our budget, if they were too high compared to our budget, we were going to do some more of that work in-house, but quite frankly, we're glad we don't have to because we're already doing enough this summer, so.
And on all of these bids, these are all factored into, obviously, the overall budget and plan. And where does that put us in total? I mean, we're still within
Yeah, it's
The budget.
consistent with the 2.6 million that we had assumed in that budget plan document.
All of these bids that I'm seeking approval on were listed in that summary document that we started with tonight.
Okay, all of them. Okay,
All of
got
them
it.
are.
So were the estimates that you put into the plan, were they pretty close?
Well, the building reconfiguration, the engineering estimates were 800,000, and the low bid was 801,000. So that one was right on.
Now, do you think that was because we did we
didn't.
publish that amount before we put it out for bid, or?
We chose not to publish any of our
Okay.
engineering estimates.
That's always my fear. We had that, it was a constant battle in the city, because we would publish our budget, and then all the bids would come in miraculously like $2 or $3 away from what we had in budget. And I'm like, okay, so does that mean if we would have cut the budget in half, that those bids, so I'm always curious.
Yeah, we chose not to publish any of our own estimates.
Right.
The good news is that the asphalt and concrete bids were much lower than what we had anticipated, which has given us flexibility to pick up some other smaller projects. So that's good news.
Okay, well, do we have a motion on the building improvements?
I move to approve the bid from Wilcott Construction Incorporated in the amount of $801,000 plus a contingency of 5% for any unforeseen construction conditions.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes. We'll move on to our pavement improvement bid.
Very good. Pavement improvements was our other big project that we want to tackle this summer. We had 5 bids. 5 companies bid on this project. The low bid was Phillips Paving in the amount of $555,885. That includes all of our parking lots, well, I guess from the south parking lot at the high school north. So it takes care of that entire campus and gets us caught up. Those parking lots are in pretty bad shape, and this is obviously an area that we needed to put some priority on, but I'd be happy to take any specific questions.
And how do the timelines work on that? I mean, will they have deadlines?
They will, all of our contractors will be working together to figure out a way to make sure that we're ready to go when school starts.
But they have defined start and end dates, so they have flexibility within those dates of how they tackle the work, but within the contract, there's start and end dates.
Refresh my mind, what was the high school sidewalk portion of this?
That was alternate
Uh,
5.
Where was it at, though? I don't-
front.
It's
of
the
the building.
west,
The front of the building.
Oh.
the school road
All right.
side.
Thank you.
There are some other areas, like the sidewalk going up towards the athletic entrance or the other commons entrance. The front portion of that gets replaced, but
And in the contract, I mean, I do see the section where it says the contractor recognized the time is of the essence and they will suffer, I don't know, I guess we will suffer. Are there penalties? I guess I was trying to find in the contract if we were,
in terms of liquidated damages, if
right,
they
you know,
don't.
if they don't, is there incentive for them to hit the finish date in the contract?
There is.
Okay.
If they go beyond the
Okay.
contract date, there's liquidated damages.
Okay. Very good. Anyone else have questions? All right, is there a motion?
I move to approve the bid from Phillips Paving for the parking lot and sidewalk work on the high school and South Middle School campuses in the amount of $555,885 plus a contingency of 5% for any unforeseen construction conditions.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes.
Great.
And the greenhouse bids.
The greenhouse bids, we had 2 bids. The low bid was from BWI Grower Technical Sales in the amount of $77,439.33. That does include one alternate for automated shade that helps with our efficiency and with our heating and
Why was there
cooling.
such a huge difference in that one between their 2 bids on that alternate shade? I was just curious because that was a pretty big difference.
Well, and if you'll notice, there was also a pretty big difference on the bid amount in general.
Sometimes the company's just hungry and wants the work or go low on everything.
Any other questions? All right, is there a motion?
I move to approve the bid from BWI Grower Technical Sales in the amount of $77,439.33 plus a contingency of 5% for any unforeseen construction conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes. Okay, playground site improvement bids.
Very good. We had 4 bids for our playground site work. The low bid was from McConnell and Associates in the amount of $136,032. And that does include an alternate for work on the swing set area at Shoal. Dr. Hoffman was very persistent on wanting the swings, and her team and looking into that on the importance of having swings at that level, and it's something we wanted to push through, and I think we can do. So I would happy to take any questions on the playground site work.
Okay, any questions?
And have we worked with them before? Yeah. Okay,
Scott's familiar with them.
thank you. Okay.
Very good. All right, is there a motion?
I move to approve the bid from McConnell and Associates in the amount of $136,032 plus a contingency of 5% for any unforeseen construction conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. All right, motion passes. Fencing bids. Oh, wait, did I skip one?
Yep.
Nope, that's right.
We had 5 bids for our fencing package. The low bid was from Acme Fencing Company in the amount of $23,526. Acme is our primary company we work with in the district, and we were happy to see them come in low.
And this is for fencing.
This is to put fence around our playgrounds. There's also some fencing needs at the high school around where the dumpsters will be, because you'll have to put a little bit of fence there. It also includes some bollards and some different, I think there's 8 bollards in the package. There's, the courtyard at Shoal, that fence is actually going to be moved.
The biggest part of it is Eagle Glen and Bridle Ridge to have a fenced
Right.
playground similar to our other elementaries now.
For
they're gonna
safety,
be-
of course.
That's right.
Okay. Any further questions? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the bid from Acme Fencing Company in the amount of $23,526 plus a contingency of 5% for unforeseen construction conditions.
Is there a
Second.
second? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, motion passes. Move on to our playground equipment.
Okay. The actual equipment, it's very hard to put out specifications for equipment because there's such variances. So we took the option or the route of using cooperative purchasing. We used, since we're a member of Education Plus, we were able to take advantage of that. I should say Scott. Scott spoke with several companies, and we did decide to go forward with Athco. They were very helpful in design, back and forth, working with our team. But we would push forward an offer from them. The total cost of the playground equipment to be purchased is $202,475. That is for all 3 of our buildings that we're working on.
And with the cooperative purchasing, that meets the requirements for bidding.
That's correct.
Because of the nature
It
of
was
that
previously-
process. It was
yeah.
it was
The-
bid in bulk.
A little more detail there. We are part of the Kansas City Cooperating School Districts, and they have a cooperative arrangement with the St. Louis group, which is Education Plus Cooperating School District. So we get to tag on to each other's bid process, and so they've had a bid process to formalize this, and so we get the same discount they do.
And with that volume, they get
Yeah.
better pricing anyway.
Sure.
Okay, very good. Any questions? All right, is there a motion?
I move to approve the bid from Athco LLC in the amount of $202,475 plus a contingency of 5% for any unforeseen construction conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes.
One thing I might add to that, there's a note in here about the foundation at its gala put out a fundraising activity at the part of the gala to support this playground, and they raised $9,500 in about 5 minutes, and
It was very exciting.
very exciting. So
And we're
they're
very
going to help
grateful for the,
support the project. So
we're very grateful for the support of the foundation. All right, next,
Okay, well.
playground surface.
We will need a place for that equipment to go. So now that we have the site work done and we ordered equipment, we'll need the surface put in place to keep them safe. Utilizing a different co-op, we're using the National IPA Purchasing Program. The bid came in with DBA Summit Flooring and Turf. DBA has worked with the district in the past with athletic turf maintenance, and their work with athletic surfaces comes very highly recommended from neighboring districts. The total cost of the surface material to be purchased would be $154,406.38.
What kind of surface is that going to be?
it's a synthetic turf with padding or material type underneath.
Cushy?
So they can empty their shoes and all the black dots fall out?
No, we're not
No,
doing
none of
that.
that,
None of
none of that.
We're going away from that.
Imagine that the teachers.
So like the foamy stuff, I mean, it has some give to it.
Kind
Yeah.
of spongy.
4 inches of carpet padding underneath
What is the longevity of that kind of material?
it. Has a 15-year warranty, the product that we're recommending.
Did you say
Wow.
15?
15-year warranty itself.
Wow. That's longer than I would have expected.
Yeah. They have several grades. The one we're electing to go with that's recommended for playgrounds is 15 years.
Okay, very good. Any further questions? All right, is there a motion?
I move to approve the bid from DBA Summit Flooring and Turf in the amount of $154,406.38, plus a contingency of 5% for any unforeseen construction conditions.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further questions? All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes. And now we have the Shoal
Sure.
rooftop units.
Rooftop units aren't as fun to talk about as playgrounds, but they are a necessity, especially, I think Ryan would argue back there, Ryan Gooding, that having air conditioning in our server rooms and keeping those from crashing is a good thing. The rooftop units in the server room that serve those server rooms run almost 24/7, and they run year-round air conditioning, as the servers don't stop producing heat when they're in there at any time. Also, the front office unit at Shoal is 16 years old and is also in need of replacement. Linux is our standard equipment used throughout the district. The sole source provider, using our education discount, is available through Linux. The cost of these units would be a little over $18,000, and luckily we have the skill set in our maintenance department that we can self-install, which saves the district a lot of money. With this, there will be some assistance needed, which was listed under estimates on the big picture, like for a crane and a few utility connections. But I'd be happy to take any
I think
questions.
I've asked this before. Do we have a system set up for maintenance, regular maintenance on these, correct? Within our own in-house? Okay.
You know, I really want to commend the district for using in-house talent to do a lot of these things. You know, I think it shows faith in our staff, that we trust them to do these things. And the fact that we have the talent, I think we should showcase that more to the community to say, we can do a lot of these things because of the quality of people that we have here. And I'd also comment that $18,000 for air conditioners is a bargain compared to what we'd have to replace servers for.
Right. All right, any other questions or comments? Okay. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the bid from Linux in the amount of $18,365.99, plus a contingency of 5% for any unforeseen construction conditions.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any further questions? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand. Motion passes. I think that takes care of our action items here. So at this time, we'll recess to closed, returning to open only to, right. No, do we,
Yeah, according to Pam, we can just recess to close, so
yeah, I don't
think
think
we're
we
good.
need a motion. Yeah. And we'll return here only to adjourn.
Yes.
Thank you all for coming.